Good morning. Megan said, my name is Peter Lyon. I manage the Southwest Region Waste Resources Program. That is what we affectionately call our solid waste program, and also the administrators of the Coordinated Prevention Grant. But most of you, actually maybe this quickly, everyone who either their hourly wage, salary, or their program is funded by CPG raise their hand? And I figured most of you. So hopefully this will provide some value to you. A few of you I recognize from a presentation I gave on Tuesday, so I'm going to apologize for hearing much the same thing. So with that, I'm going to break my presentation into two parts. The first part, I'm going to focus on our ongoing rule change. And the second part, I'll talk a little bit about how we're administering the current program, or at least the 17-19 program, and where we're at with that. Okay, so a lot of people have asked me, why is ecology changing the rule, and why now? And there's some reasons, and the reasons are basically, there are some technical problems with the rule. A few biennia ago, we switched from the program from a calendar year to the fiscal year, which means from January to December, we switched to July to June, and our current rule states the calendar rule, and that's not right, and that's a problem. There are other questions about eligibility. The way we've been administering the program for years, we've expanded our scope of eligibility. The current rule does not reflect that. The proposed rule will address those issues. Another change was, as I'm sure you're aware, the agency implemented a comprehensive web-based grant system, affectionately known as EAGLE, and the current administrative process identified in the rule doesn't really get into that, so we needed to make those changes. And probably the primary reason is the feeling is the rule, I think, was about 20 years old, existing rule, and it's just not reflective of where we're at today in administering the program, and it's just time to make some changes. So I'm going to highlight some of the significant changes, or at least there's many throughout, but these are the ones that I thought were draw the most attention. And the first one is that there are actually two rules that relate to coordinated prevention grants. One is 312, which administers for most of you, or the way we run the programs under the 312 rule. But there's also a rule called entitled 313, Local Solid Waste Enforcement Grant Regulations, that predated the Coordinated Prevention Grant Program. And when the CPG rule came into effect, we sort of started ignoring this particular rule. This addresses the local health department component. And we just folded that into 312, or we will be folding that into 312, and we're going to just appeal 313, so it'll no longer matter. And bean counters in Olympia, that's an important thing. The next thing is we're changing the name of CPG, Coordinated Prevention Grant. Right now, we're thinking we're going to change it to Local Solid Waste Financial Assistance. It's certainly a mouthful, and if we could have thought of a shorter or more pithy name, I mean, that would have been neat, but I'll give you the reasons why we're going to this different name change. One is we were requested to do so by our work group of CPG members. They felt that the Coordinated Prevention Grant, they felt that the term grant connotated sort of an extra or a luxury item. It didn't convey the necessity or the importance of the program. So that's where we went to the statute, and we realized the term financial assistance is used throughout the statute, and so that's where that component of the name came from. It was actually my desire to put the word local in the title. 100% of this money goes to local government, and I've had some conversations with legislators and OFM where they don't understand that, and so I thought by putting local in there, that would be clear. Solid waste, because we've had many experiences where we're communicating our budget needs to OFM and the legislature, and they see coordinated prevention grants, and it doesn't really mean much to them, and the feeling was by putting solid waste in there, it would be more intuitive. So that is, if folks have different opinions or have a different idea, we're willing to accept them, but that's just where we're at the moment. The next significant change I would like to identify is we're putting language in the rule that's going to specifically allow retroactive costs. That has been our practice, to be honest with you, for as many biennials as I can remember, but but I've been told by some of my counties that their commissioners are nervous about incurring costs prior to having a signed grant agreement. And so we thought, or we hope that by putting a language in the rule that allows costs that are incurred after the signed budget by the governor that are eligible, they're going to meet your grant, and that they fit your task, that you can charge for them into your grant program. And this isn't really a change to the program, but hopefully adding the language will make some folks and elected officials feel better. The next change is a switch on how we administer the jurisdictional health department component of the grant. Traditionally, or what the rule currently says, we've always given the money out and just taken the JHD component and just divided it by 35, more or less. Multi-jurisdictional health departments got a higher proportionate share, but essentially everybody got the same amount. And in my region, I have, I think Wahkiakum County might be the least populous. There's 4,000 people, I think, in Wahkiakum County. So they got the same amount of money as King County. And there was some observation that maybe didn't make the most sense. And so the health department representatives on our work group came to us and said, can we change that? And what they've asked for was have the same approach that ecology in the rule has for the solid waste managers and implementation side, which is a formula. It's a fixed amount plus population. And that's what we proposed in the rule. Another change that might cause some angst or some interest is performance expectations. Ecology's coming up with or put in the rule that there will be performance expectations regarding grant management and outcomes. Quite honestly, not a lot, but we have some grant recipients that don't submit believe it or not, they don't submit their quarterly payment requests when they should. Sometimes it might be a year or more. And that causes problems, particularly when the grants run out of a bond account. There are people who've left. I had one of my recipients who left $250,000. They assured Ecology that they would spend it all, and on June 30th, the last day of the 13-15 biennium, they left $250,000 there, and it's really bad for the rest of the grant program because it really shows it makes a statement to the legislature that perhaps the need isn't as great as it could be, when I don't think that's true. It was just this one county. So what Ecology's proposed is that we'll develop criteria via the CPG guidelines, and everybody's performance will be evaluated. And if you score below a certain mark, you'll have a potential 10% reduction the next grant cycle. I sincerely hope that never happens to anybody. I think it would be rare if it does. And before something like that would be imposed, there would be communication between the grant officer in Ecology and the grant recipient to kind of explain where you are. You will all get a copy of the criteria you'll be measured against, so there won't be any surprises for anybody. But the reason why we're doing this is we're just trying to make the program run smoother, be more efficient, and frankly, spend it out. And that's been a problem. This is one that maybe a note here is that Ecology has proposed dividing the money, the CPG allocation differently, appropriation, I guess I'll use that word. Traditionally, and the current rule says that the money is appropriated and it'll be divided 80%. Actually, what it says is that 20% will go to jurisdictional health departments, and intuitively the 80% would be for the solid waste management, the recycling, waste reduction, recycling, education, and planning component. That was a decision made by a work group about 20 years ago, and I've heard some of the members of that process explain to me, or tell me that the agreement was actually that the 20% for health departments was only a floor and not a ceiling, but that's not the way it's been administered over the years. It's always been a point. And we've reached a point, it's Ecology's opinion and our input from health departments, is the funding has been reduced to such a level that in order to keep our health departments viable, we have to increase the funding above the 20%. So what we've proposed is sort of an either-or situation. And basically the either is that the health departments will get no less than 20% of the appropriation, or $75,000 per county. $75,000, I believe, is $2,925,000. So approximately a little over 29% in a $10 million cycle. If you do the math, at around $14.5 million, once the appropriation is at that level, it'll revert back to the 80-20. So for this current cycle, if the appropriation goes as we kind of anticipate it will, the health departments are going to take a little larger chunk than they have in the past. Aligned funding priorities with statute. This might be noteworthy or interesting to the MRW crowd in particular. When we were going through 7105D, which is the model toxic control component, and it's what technically are supposed to fund CPG, the local toxic control account portion of MOTCA, there's actually stated priorities for the intention for the spending of the money. And the priority, it says in priority order, and it actually has moderate waste and hazardous waste management planning above solid waste management planning. And so ecology's always had priorities in the rule, but the priorities didn't actually align with the statute. And so we're changing that so they do align with the statute. How we're going to administer that, we'll do that through the guidelines. Ecology's, at this point, I had a conversation yesterday. I think what we're going to do in the guidelines is we're going to, our current thinking, is we're going to ask the recipients a series of questions, and we're going to leave it up to you to answer. But essentially, you know, the first question is, do you feel your hazardous waste plan is up to date? Is it, everyone has one, but is it going to is it up to date? Is it meeting your needs? Is your program fully funded? And all those things. And you'll answer those questions. And if you can answer through them and say yes, then you'll move on down to your solid, the same questions related to solid waste. Ecology is not going to tell you that you need to spend it on hazardous waste. We just want you to think about this in the priority order that the statute lays out. So this will be a change. So this is a rule schedule from where we're at. The first two items are in lighter font because they've already occurred. Where we're at now is we have a beginning of a formal comment period on proposed language starting June 7th. We anticipate holding a hearing on the 27th, but due to some concern about the fact that there may not be a budget, we could potentially have to cancel that. But we'll keep that on. The hearings right now, we're scheduling a single hearing. It'll be in Olympia, but we'll make it via WebEx. So if you want to follow along, participate from a remote location, that's possible. Comments, Ecology will be accepting comments on draft language from the June 7th through July 7th, assuming Ecology is still employed. The adoption date of the rule is August 23rd, and the effective date is September 23rd. We've received advice from our attorney generals that we can proceed with the proposed language and start the program, even though it's not yet final. So with that, I'm going to kind of switch a little bit to how we're going to run CPG for 17-19 cycle. And there's some questions there. So some of the things we're working on right now is the draft allocation table. I mentioned it before. There's a work group. It consists of 8 members, 4 of which represent health departments, 4 of which represent solid waste managers. I've asked the solid waste managers, I've given them the amount that will be available. We're assuming there'll be a $10 million program. We're assuming that because the Senate budget identified $10 million, I believe, if I recall, from the state building construction account. The governor proposed, the governor actually produces 2 budgets. They call them Book 1 and Book 2. One is one based on revenue that he would like to see, and the other is one based on, is the one that's compliant with the state constitution, which is based on existing revenue sources. The Book 1 budget, which is included a desire that the legislature would pass a supplemental tax to the model toxic control account. And if that happens, then the governor has CPG funded at a local toxic control, as the statute says it should. The Book 2 budget has CPG once again funded at the state building construction account, which is a bond account. The Senate, or the House rather, identified the local toxic control account, but they did not specify whether it was contingent upon the passage of the supplemental. So what's consistent? $10 million in all 3 budgets. What's not consistent is where the money's coming from. That matters because the way it typically works, there's an operating budget, there's a capital budget, and then there's this bond account. And last cycle, in 15-17, I believe the operating budget was signed and the capital budget were both signed about June 30th, give or take a day. But the bond portion wasn't signed until like July 9th, I think, by the governor. So that meant the retroactive costs couldn't occur legally before the governor signed that. We're anticipating that that right now that there's not a lot of progress, as you've probably heard in the legislature. I think the current special session ends on May 23rd, and I'm hearing that there's not a lot of budget discussion going on. So we anticipate the governor will convene a second special session. I don't know if there's a limit to how many special sessions he can do, but presuming this goes right up as it did in 15-17, right up to the end, it's possible that we don't have a capital budget or a state building construction account July 1 when the new program year would start. If that's the case, ecology can't allow or have any budgets or contracts signed or anything, any costs incurred that would be eligible.
So application period. I think last cycle we did applications in March, and as I'm sure you've noticed, we haven't had an application cycle yet. We're looking right now from July 1st to July 25th, and again, that's assuming there's a budget. If there's not even an operating budget, all ecology employees will have been sent home on June 29th, I think is the last working day. But
There's an operating budget. We'll have a cycle from July 1st to July 25th, and actually, I think that's wrong. It's July 11th. I think I got cut off. July 11th to July 25th will be the application cycle, and we apologize for the delay. There's many reasons, including the changing rule, but that's not the only reason. Eagle has to be updated. Ecology is asking the contractor who built Eagle to include a feature that allows recipients to check a box. So if you have a task that you did in 15-17 that you're going to do again in 17-19, you can check that box and it'll pre-populate all the fields for that task, so you don't have to repeat that step. You don't have to work with your grant officer to negotiate the language. The only thing you'll need to do is scale it proportionate to your allocation amount. And so, and the other thing that's noteworthy, even though we don't expect to have the application period will be open through July 25th, we believe we will get actually award letters or the letter out to counties or recipients sooner than we did last cycle because of this change to Eagle. So the first day ecology could actually offer a grant would be on July 31st, but I'll repeat what I said earlier. If you had costs incurred and there was a signed budget prior to that date, then you can back charge for those things. So future funding for CPG, and this one's a tougher one. Our plans are to go back in the 1921 biennium and ask for the $28.2 million that we asked for in 17-19. So, you know, just we don't see $10 million as the new CPG or the new level. We hope to restore it to what it was in 13-15 biennium. Ecology is hosting a conference in early October in Leavenworth. Many of you will be invited. I don't know if those save the dates have gone out yet. If they haven't, they will soon. And one of the topic sessions we anticipate having is a sort of how do we get CPG restored to levels before previous levels, and so that's something I think that's a high time to have. We're looking internally at fixes to the MOTCA account, and they can be varied, but the MOTCA account is basically connected to the price of oil, and that's pretty much what does it. Price of oil has been down, got down to I think the 30-some, low 30s. I think it's currently trading around $50, which is an improvement, which means it's going to mean more MOTCA money. But I don't know that we can count on oil getting back to $100 a barrel in the next couple of years. So there's discussions about potentially expanding the list of products or hazardous materials that are subject to MOTCA. There's the idea of creating a floor, the supplemental, where MOTCA can't, if it goes below that on trading values, price tags, then you increase the tax, proportionate tax. There's a number of ideas that are being tossed around the agency, and of course, we aren't the final deciders. We would go to OFM and the governor's office and ask them to propose statute and legislation change. So the main takeaway there is that we recognize that the monthly account perhaps isn't going to be the answer that it was historically for all these programs. I cut this one out because I think Megan or somebody sent it to me. This was an article in the Whitby News Times, and it was just, I thought, a really nice story about some of the struggles that folks are facing. Megan said that Mr. Clark is actually here today. Oh, so I thought, I don't know, there may be similar stories running in your own local newspapers or what have you, but it's just, I thought it was pretty accurate and pretty well done. And I think folks take for granted some of the services you provide and don't really connect that the greater, larger funding issue is impacting them on this level. And so I thought, I don't know if Gene or whomever got the Whitby Times interested, but it was a good move. And if others are successful in doing the same, I think that would help your cause. So I have to apologize. The CPG news just isn't very good. There's not a whole lot ecology can do about that. The governor's office doesn't allow ecology to go to the legislature and lobby for more money. The counties are working with the Association of Washington Counties at the current time. We support the lobbyist who does that. We help her when we can. We're working with the CPG work group, which is made of members of local government staff. But, at the current time, it's just the CPG picture is just not a rosy one. And we don't have a lot of better news to say other than it's just we're going to have to pull together and try to figure out how to maybe improve it for the next biennium. So that is the end of my presentation.